Human society is a rather delicate matter. There is a saying that you are no more than about 9 missed meals before revolts start and it begins collapsing as hunger spreads through the area, disrupting the moda operandi. But with that said, absolutely no shot these ridiculous looking things are disrupting humans for more time than it takes for us to say, hey, pop a concussive force detonator into that weird primate wheel thing. I refuse to believe it. And that brings us around to the completely insane episode we were covering today. Just wait, you'll see what I mean. In the events of Arcadian, humanity has come into contact with a species of unknown origin. It could be an Earth-grown classic, but we really don't know. What we do know is our species is having a tough time dealing with them, leading to a massive depopulation issue. These creatures put Homo sapiens on our heels as cities fell and everyone fanned out to escape the onslaught. But the question is, what are these things, where do they come from, and what is with their sonic disorientation that they utilize to incapacitate prey by slapping their mandible and skulls together? Now, let's explain that in today's episode. But before getting into it, thank you for watching. If you enjoy this content, then dropping a like for your boy is always helpful to get the video out there. And subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. We actually just passed 1,040,000 and I appreciate the support. And if you would like to make a suggestion on what you want me to cover, head over to Discord. There's a channel for it, links in the description. We kick off our story with an eyeless teddy bear. As a man sits in a bar and he's not looking so hot. Either that or it's Nick Cage's friend or his wife or something. I don't really know. Who knows? Papa Cage then takes his pack and begins running off as dogs bark in the distance. Society ain't looking too great as explosions are heard in the distance. So, pretty much like November 2024, it seems. Haha, topical. Aren't you guys excited for everything that's about to happen? So great. I love it. So Papa Cage, or PC for short, has definitely been working on his cardio as he continues his jaunt through an alleyway with people screaming in the distance. Passing by a bunch of non-functional meat suits, it seems that whatever is happening is stacking up quite the body count. Getting outside of the city, what can I say about it that hasn't been already said about Afghanistan? It looks bombed out and depleted, circa player haters ball. As Cage enters a crappy building, newly introduced offspring are hanging out as he breathes heavily over the offspring. Also, fun fact about new offspring cries, it's supposed to activate your almonds. Have you ever wondered why tones, like that weird screeching sound, is chosen in horror movies? I've said it before, but it's always interesting to mention. They actually mimic the same frequencies of a new offspring's cry. For males, it's meant to agitate, and for females, it's meant to make feel uneasy. Basically, someone has to go fight the saber-tooth, and someone has to grab the offspring and retreat. Behavioral biology has always been absolutely wild to me. Brings up the idea of, are we in control or something else in control of our actions? Anyhow, it is now 15 years later. We are no closer to understanding what the crap is happening. As PC looks out, he doesn't look any older, aging like fine wine. Okay, I don't know if I can really say that about Nick Cage. 15 years has been good to him. And as they sit inside, his other son is running through the moder forest, or moder, what, you remember the elk thing from that movie. Anyways, as they batten down the hatches for the evening, this is probably fairly important. So, who are these people? Cage's son? Stolen offspring? Evidently they are his twins. Took me a while to figure that out. That was actually like a familial connection there, and not just like oh, I found these sort of scenario like Tug Speedman, Scorcher 1 through 4 movies. So PC stands pensively out as he yells, "Over the line," as his son shows up late. This line is apparently important, not to go past, but to be honest with you, it's not even remotely important to anyone's actual safety, as we will find out. So this movie is going to be a lot of running. Continuing to close everything up for the night, Cage tells them to head to the second floor, which at this point you would think this is pretty much standard routine, so why would you even need to say it? He then asks them if they are safe and secure, and they're like, yes. He's like, all right, it's dinner time. Yes, a very human interaction. They say grace to the Lord as then they eat their gruel. Cage tells Thomas that he was late and he can't go past the boundaries. Tom was out at Rose Farm and he tells his brother it's special because he's not there. A fight then breaks out, which seems ridiculous until I remember I've been in a fist fight with my brother before, so it does happen. It's called brotherly love, look it up. It doesn't really get less violent until you leave the house. So as they conclude their fight, the one known as Joseph then plays chess against himself as his brother sits down to learn how to play it. He's recreating a chess game as the dog tries to dig through the wooden floor. Probably should have paid attention to that. Getting up, this is evidently meaning something, as we will find out. Cage then grabs the beaten stick as they hear creaking noises. Approaching the door, it starts banging as something on the other side is trying to get in. Bracing the door, it finally stops as whatever's on the other side just kind of gives up. Locking themselves in an interior room, Joseph says he counted how long the first attempts were, and he says the first was 10 seconds, the second was 20, and the third was 1. The first attempt to make it through was to actually just try to get through. The second was like a stronger attempt, and then the third was in frustration. Looking at the door the next morning, it's clawed up by whatever's trying to get in. This is highly interesting as this implies a few things. First, this species is intelligent enough to know what a door is, which, believe it or not a lot of animals know. So whether that be exposure from breaking into other places or just an actual deductive reasoning skill is unknown. However, as we will see with this species, it does appear to exhibit a high level of problem-solving ability, almost at a primate level. Second, this shows that this species knows they are in there, which means they're actually pretty good hunters. So the next day, it's probably Saturday or something, so like most dads, the sons are volunteered for their customary 15 hours of manual labor, as the other son just wants to head out and go hang out with his girlfriend and not do any of this. But obviously, he doesn't know about the rules of the world. You have to work on Saturday mornings. I can relate to all this, actually. My father presented me with a choice when I was a youngling. Used to work landscaping with him every summer from like 4 years old to 16. God, I hated every minute of it. Not hanging out with the old man, but it was like 1,000 degrees and 100% humidity in Georgia in July. Basically, he told me, hey, if you don't like working outside, make sure you go to school so you don't have to work outside. And thus I became a scientist and a YouTuber. Summer can suck it. Thanks for watching. Also, it's probably where I get my work ethic, so unfortunately, it was a canon event that I did have to do this. So Cage then asks Joseph what he's been working on in his shed. He's building a vehicle to help them, but he can't get it to start. Remember, you need spark, gas, and compression. He says he doesn't want to hide from these things anymore, and I'm not really sure if a golf cart is going to solve this problem. But Cage reads a quote about how people believe they came after the pollution that people caused, which in turn meant they were here to exterminate humanity. Listen, this is our planet. If anyone's going to destroy it, it's probably just going to be us. So Cage thinks that there's still a lot of people out there, we just don't know about them. And the air and water are getting cleaner every day, which in some ways, yes. The microplastics though? Probably not. Checking the vehicle, Cage is of course able to start it as he swaps out one relay. Yes, that's how that works. So also, this would start up with 15-year-old gas. Spoiler, it would not. So I say this a lot, but it's worth mentioning in case the world ever completely crashes out. Gas can only last between 3 months to 3 years, and this is because water contamination as well as chemical deterioration. As chemicals evaporate out of the fuel, this leaves almost behind like a varnish, if anything. 15 years later, and you're telling me that gas is still around? No shot. Also, horrifyingly enough, because we are all in this existential dread, we really need to stop flirting with the idea of nuking each other into oblivion, because even if we do rebuild society after the fact, we won't be able to access the oil that's still in the ground because all the easily accessible fuel is gone. We simply would be stuck in the early industrial revolution stage using steam, if that's even we could find like coal. But anyways, just don't think too much about it. Anyhow, Cage is now teaching them how to drive. And did you guys actually get taught how to drive? Because I never did. It seems pretty intuitive. And that's probably why I also drive it like I stole it. Slamming on the brakes, he gives his brother a concussion as then they pull back up to the house. As the concussed brother then gets off of the golf cart, he tries to go to the Rose farm, but they need to go down to the river instead and salvage stuff as the barriers have been pretty much getting the business since the last night's attempt break-in. So Joseph and Thomas bicker about how Thomas has to take care of Joseph, brother things. And despite what old Papa Cage said to do, Thomas then nopes out of there to go to the farm to leave Joseph behind, off to see the apparent girly friend. Running back through the motor forest once more, he then heads to the farm as he's greeted by Mrs. Rose. Going to get water, Charlotte is waiting for him. Totally called it. No young man wants to willingly go work at any farm unless there's something there that he wants. So she says it's good to see him, as then he walks off. Ice cold, brother. That's how you do it. Charlotte says though, oh, my dad wants you to help him with something. Again, the walk off, without looking, undefeated. So Cage fixes the door, and then sits under a tree near a waterfall, thinking poetically about all the movie choices he's been over the years. Truly a blessing to mankind. So as he looks down, he sees something in the rocks. I guess it's like a hole or something. Meanwhile, Joseph attaches a winch to his body, which, brother, that is cabling. That is not going to feel great squeezing your ribs. Actually, it's going to be alarmingly painful. So then he climbs down and then heads inside of a building. Beginning his search, he then sees tools of the trade poster, nice, as there is something in the corner. A bunch of bugs then come flying out at him as these appear to be Madagascar hissing cockroaches. These appear to be also everywhere. So here we see canonically what these things are supposed to be, As you're about to find out, which is right now, this species is highly confusing from a biological perspective. These bugs are a part of the creature itself, or at least they roll together with it, which I'm inclined to believe is the latter over the former for several reasons. I seriously doubt this species that led to humanity's downfall is somehow composed of cockroaches. These bugs are, I think, working in conjunction with this species due to the simple fact that this race is actually a symbiotic conglomeration of several different animals. Due to humanity's polluting effect on the planet, in order to survive extinction, species would band together to create these things that we're about to see. Now, obviously, this is a ridiculous concept. Animals spending time together, they're not just gonna create an amalgamation of like one animal. But keep an open mind, nerd. So here we go. These roaches appear to have intentionally joined forces with several other animals, which I will kind of highlight later. Because of their joining together, this collective aggression appears to be quite intentional facing humanity, and it only appears to be at humanity, as we will find out. Now the roaches existing completely separate from the main species, which is in fact a single body due to the attacks that we're going to see, this implies that there are those that stand alone but remain aggressive towards humanity simply by being around this other aggressive species, thus attacking Joseph. However, at the end of the day, they are just roaches, so while this would be gross and it would make your skin crawl, they cannot do that much damage to something as large as us, allowing Joseph to escape. But this does indicate that this species is in the area and humanity is beginning to tread on their turf once more. So back over at Lover's Farm, Charlotte leads Thomas out to a tree where the barrier was for her. They begin talking about explaining the end of the world in 10 seconds. I got one. Giant meteor wiped out everyone. Sunrise, sunset. I was hoping they would discuss the actual real apocalypse, but instead they're all too young to really know what happened to lead to all this, so they're just kind of like, oh, everyone got sick. So Thomas then, though, launches into a story of what happened. No lie, sounds like this dude's talking about Fortnite, because he's like, oh, a purple haze and a storm formed that then moved in on a small town, and then all the humans who were there were sleeping peacefully in their houses. Maybe I have brain rot, I don't know. I'm terminally online, so it would make a lot of sense. So because they are currently in the apocalypse, this bums everyone out, obviously, because they're talking about all their problems. As Thomas says, well, it's getting late. I'll come back tomorrow. Charlotte then asks if he's got 10 more seconds to spare, and by asking that, they kind of look at each other, and that was the 10 seconds. It's sort of like saying, hey, can I ask you one more question before you go? The only answer at that point is, you just did. And then you just kind of walk off. So then she hugs him for about 10 seconds. Thomas now begins his jaunt back to the meeting spot to get Joseph. While that's happening, Joseph can't get the golf cart started. Looking at how much time he has left, which actually, if you want to know how to do it, you put your hand out, fully extend your arm, and you go from the sun to the horizon. Each finger is about roughly 15 minutes. So over at the ditch, he jumps over. Some rocks actually were thrown upwards, and this will never be explained. Cage now goes out looking for his sons as they had not come back yet. And then Joseph, you better just strap on your running shoes, brother, because you gotta get out of there. But instead, he keeps trying to get it started and then blows into the relay like an N64 cartridge, and luckily it does turn over. At this point, Thomas then screws up his jump because of the thing throwing the pebbles back up from earlier, slipping on some rocks, and then hitting his head and falling into the ditch. Nice. Joseph then gets to the meeting spot, but doesn't see his brother, so he's like, nah, screw him. So he just leaves him behind. Joseph then tells Cage that Thomas left to go to the Rose Farm, as Cage says, I'm gonna go look for him. Grabbing a single knife, is there nothing else y'all could find? You know, something of the more force multiplying variety. Waking up at the bottom of the ditch though, dude's lucky he didn't instantly snap his neck like a twig, because that was a pretty far fall. Looking over, he then sees something, but it's too dark to tell. Looking up, yep, you might be stuck, homie. Luckily, Nicolas Cage is making his way through to steal the declaration of, to get you before the monsters get you. Honestly, I don't know which is more threatening. Exploring the ravine with his sparker, bro do be stuck. But as he moves over, he then finds a hand and a face from something behind the wall. Well then, that was horrible looking. Back at the house, things are equally bad for Joseph. The creatures have begun surrounding it. Thomas is now hiding, trying to not let that thing know he's there, but it just saw you. No shot it didn't see you. Pulling out his pig sticker, that's not going to do much. He then stabs at the hand as a fight ensues, but you can't really see anything. Wonderful. Luckily, Pop Cage shows up, taking the creature out because humanity is number one. Moving into the ravine with him, now they're both stuck. Awesome. So they share a nice hug. And remember, if anything knocks you out for that long, it's actually a real problem. In movies and stuff, they show people getting knocked out for hours. That denotes brain damage. A few seconds isn't bad though. We've all been there. Well, I don't know, I've been there. I think a lot of people have been there. Assuming he had a concussion though, they decide to stay for the night and just kind of seal up the entrance. Back at the house, Joseph is sleeping downstairs as the peephole is moved open. Something then puts its hand inside and is curled up like 4 times. Good lord, it's creepy. So it begins attempting to reach out to him as it grows its finger, but he's just out of reach. It then opens the door, which these things look horrifying. Joseph is able to drop a trap on it, completely trapping the thing, and this definitely rustles my jimmies. So since seeing these things, let's talk about its physical morphology for a moment, and as we see this creature, it is going to be quadrupedal for the most part. It appears to move much like an ape possessing arms and legs, but using all four for movement. Their skin appears to be somewhat gray and darker in coloring, with wiry hair covering their frame as well, which may denote that they are, in fact, mammals. These arms are able to increase in length at will, stretching, but do have a size limit concerning how far they can actually reach out. The same can be said for with the fingers. The claws that they have can jut outwards, sometimes extending to the length of the forearms, which may denote that these claws can retract into the arm itself. As they move, they appear to walk much like a chimp or a gorilla would, but their heads are a bit strange. The patterning on the heads appears to not be an actual face, but sort of like how tigers have patterns of hair on their ears. It's going to make it look like they're kind of looking behind them to prevent other tiger attacks. This species has done something very similar. The red eyes are not actually eyes at all, but just hair color making it look like eyes. These are known as eye spots. The apparent teeth that are square appear to also kind of just be skin coloring along with the nose. This elongated face would appear very strange to humans and actually very likely give us pause for a moment, as it does appear to be almost like a primate in nature given the ratio of the face. However, the real eyes reside under the mouth pattern. This is seen when the creature then opens up its mouth and the skull would split apart at a chin level as opposed to where the fake mouth is. The mouth of this creature is actually quite massive, and the mandible can open 180 degrees from the rest of the skull. It does have a fairly strange quirk about it, which we will also see later. The mouth itself also has several sharp teeth, which does denote that it does eat meat, and given that it's able to stretch its arm and fingers as well as curl up its arms, this would seem to imply that this species' connective tissue is quite loose and joint hypermobility in all of its limbs is the standard and not a mutation. This allows for it to move quite strangely, as the body seems to almost flow over obstacles and over the ground as opposed to like having deliberate movement. It's sort of like when you pick up a cat and it feels like kind of like watery in your hand almost, whereas if you pick up a dog, it's rigid. That would be the difference. So this would seem to also imply that the bones within the body are not as sturdily connected like standard primates. Instead, connective tissues that are highly flexible allow for the bones to exist and give the body shape, but if the need arises, they can separate these bones quite easily, allowing for the limbs to reach triple length. So back in the ditch, they're having their own troubles. Pulling back the rock, the creatures then break in as they begin hearing rumbling. Looking down, they realize the creatures are going full locust horde mode as they are burrowing underneath. The creatures then trap them by sealing in the entrance as Papa Cage tries to beat them back, ultimately blowing up them along with his arm fairly severely. So waking up the next morning, Joseph sees no one. Heading out with a golf cart, it appears as though Thomas survived as he's dragging his dad out of the cave. Finding the dog, he keeps driving and then rolls up on Thomas and Papa Cage. Looking at his arm, yep, that's gonna need some Neosporin. They then drag him back onto the golf cart and bring him back to the house. Letting him sleep, Thomas then hears something in the cage. Yeah, you may have forgotten to mention that you captured one, Joseph. So Joseph then tells him to stop messing with it as the light hurts them. This obviously upsets Thomas. Joseph says that these creatures are starting to break in faster and faster, which implies they're beginning to learn. Basically a learning computer. They're not really a computer, but whatever. Thomas then says that he can take the creature and just let it out of the cage, which absolutely not. This is definitely teenage bravado. Fighting each other though, they inadvertently release that thing as it crawls away from them to get away from the light. It ends up standing up as we get another good look at this face, and the dog immediately goes after it as it screams and begins its attack. So it turns into just straight hand-to-hand combat. Stabbing it, humanity's always gonna be number one. But they cut off its thinking member as Joseph was upset because he was going to study it. Thomas wants to know if they can eat it, which that's pretty normal thing. I'd be like, yeah, we just kill it, might as well eat it. It's possible, but considering you don't really know what it is, I wouldn't recommend it. Joseph then sets in on the thing with a pizza cutter, and I guess he should be asking that thing what it wants on its tombstone. That was really bad. Nobody remembers the night? Okay. So, all the important parts are there. Some organs, some blood, then something disturbs him as he looks at it. These creatures also have massive hands and claws. Thomas comes in saying that they need to take their dad to the Rose Farm for better care. Joseph says, though, that it's a waste of time as they won't help them because he wouldn't help them. What are you basing that on, bro? So, given that we have seen this thing now and how it operates and how it can be taken out, this tells us multiple things. First, even though the roaches from earlier are symbiotic with it, this is one singular body and not composed of multiple different animals. This is shown by how it has organs, a body to be taken out, blood, everything that an individual multicellular organism would be composed of. Removing the head of this creature also clearly takes it out, meaning it's got a central nervous system. So, enough blue balling you on that front. What exactly is this thing? Given everything that we have seen, I would suggest that it's some form of primate, but one that doesn't seem to have evolved under the same conditions as most primates. As we will see, this species is quite adept at digging through the earth, potentially showing that it actually moved under the ground some time ago. Along with that, there are a few supporting adaptations showing this. A, their obvious ability to dig through the earth with great efficiency. While man can do this with the help of machines, animals that are able to dig burrows and under objects, this means they would have evolved in this manner. 2, their claws are seen several times, and they almost appear to be somewhat like mole claws, having a curved shape and being quite broad. This would help them shovel dirt out from in front of them quite well, allowing for them to produce these tunnels as they move through. And D, given their fear of the light, this would mean on the evolutionary pathway they were likely troglodytes. These type of animals reside exclusively in cave systems or under the ground. The burning and pain that they feel is because their body actually has no way to prevent sunlight from injuring their bodies, and this likely causes cellular damage even just coming out of the ground for a moment. So typically you have melanin that will protect your actual nucleus of your cell from damaging rays of light, and even then you've got systems of checks like DNA polymerase, ligase, a whole plethora of enzymes that are there to essentially repair genetic damage like thymine dimers that are caused from UV radiation coming in and then damaging your DNA. But if you're a troglodyte, you're not gonna have this type of repair system, or it's not gonna be as adept as those who are on the surface. And because of that, when the sun actually hits those cells, they likely just undergo apoptosis, which would be, painful if enough cells are doing that. So light also would overwhelm their eyes, which I'm not gonna lie to you, the odds that they still have eyes is a little strange, but it's important to remember that there are other abominations that exist within the darkness that have eyes, and unfortunately, this thing is on the planet with us in real life, and it's known as the anglerfish. God, they're hideous. So with all that said, this species resides on a primate platform and appears to have picked up several points of mimicry from other animals while also having a symbiotic relationship with animals around it. But the question is why? This concept is essentially to survive what man is doing. Evidently, we are destroying the planet in this movie, so in an effort to survive, this species appears to have taken on many traits of different animals. Now, is this genetic or behavioral? I believe it's kind of a bit of both. The changes to its genes are required in order for it to take on whatever it's doing and why these things even look this way. And I'd say 80% of the changes we see delineate it from the standard primate. That's going to be genetic, like the hypermobility, the arm extension, claws, and the ability to open up its head to absolutely ridiculous proportions. If pollution is to blame for this, then it would appear that this species may have been forced up from underground due to groundwater becoming contaminated, either taking out their source of food, being other troglodytes, or they couldn't stay under the ground due to their water source being basically contaminated. Now, would they know that man was doing this? And if they are animals, why are they not attacking other livestock? We'll kind of get there momentarily. So over at the farm, Charlotte then throws seeds to nothing as they hear them approaching. And as they go to close the gate, I thought for a second they were blocking him out, but they weren't. So anyways, Thompson asks if they can stay there until he gets better, but they have no medicine to spare. Pop some antibiotics on it and you'll be good to go. Oh, how do you do that, you say? It's actually pretty easy. Remember this because you never know when you might need it. So you chop up some bread, place it in a sterilized flask. You can do that by basically burning it over a fire for a little while. It's gonna kill everything inside of it, and then you let it cool down. But it needs to be something that you can cover up. Then you place the bread in it, and it needs to be around 70 degrees for a week. Then you check and you're looking for blue-green mold. While that is growing, you take some potatoes, slice them up, boil them in water for about 30 minutes, and then you strain out just the water. Add some sugar and gelatin to it, and this will create agar. From here, take a wire, superheat it to sterilize it, just put it in a fire for about 30 seconds, let it cool, and then touch one of the blue-green colonies. Then you streak out the plate in a few strokes, then sterilize it, and this is gonna be the following day because it needs to grow, and then you're gonna streak out, basically touch another one of those colonies, and you're gonna streak it out again, and then what that's gonna do is it's going to give you refined colonies. Continue to incubate it, and you should have this yellowish growth, and that should contain penicillin. You can refine it further from there and test it to make sure that it actually takes that bacteria, but that's how you derive penicillin, which you never know, it might be handy. So Charlotte says that, oh, we have room, and her dad's like, nah, your dad's strong, he'll pull through. The mom says Thomas can stay though, and that should leave more supplies for Joseph and Cage. Joseph now says that he doesn't want anything from his brother because he doesn't want to take responsibility for anything, and you suck. So now they have a right proper domestic on the lawn as Thomas then starts choking out his brother. Like, yeah, man, You're doing that in front of your girlfriend and her parents too, showing that you can't control your emotions. That doesn't make you look like a psycho at all. I'm sure they would love for you to date their daughter. Very good. So Joseph now nopes out of there as everyone just sort of watches him, and then they let him in. As he's then shown his quarters, Charlotte says that he needs to eat to keep up his strength. Man, they got some good food over there. Checking out Charlotte's room, evidently these creatures no longer even go to the farm anymore, and how exactly did they get that lucky? As we will see, not lucky enough. So then they have a talk about absolutely nothing, as all I can think about is, isn't there like work to be done? It's the end of the world, right? Like it's an all hands on deck, full-time job at this point. So finally they kiss, as I mean, who didn't see that coming? As then the dad walks in, classic. I'll tell you, I've had a situation like this. It's really awkward. As then this man has to like duck walking through doors. That's a huge dude. So over at the dynamic duo on the golf cart, the old man is still unconscious. What sort of weekend at Bernie's nonsense this is like, dude, wake this guy up. So Joseph then stops the golf cart, seeing that the sheep are all freaking out, running away. And again, I'm surprised the livestock are all just allowed to run around. This would mean that these things actually aren't attacking any other animal except for man. So approaching the house, he then sees that it was attacked and broken into. Pulling his old man inside the house, he then heads back out and finds footprints in the autopsy room. Destroying his lab station, I have no idea why, he starts pulling up the floorboards. Again, not really explained. Back over at the farm, Thomas is just sort of snooping through stuff as he gets totally caught by Charlotte. And oh snap, he was searching for the medicine. He says that he can't stay as it's getting late and he's gonna get jacked by one of these things. Our herder then overhears them talking about the medicine as he continues to ask for it. You know you guys can just make penicillin, right? So then she hands him a nondescript bottle of something as he says, okay, I will come back. He ain't coming back. Beginning his run, the farmhand then pulls a pellet dispenser on him because he thinks that he was stealing. Thomas says, I didn't steal, I was given the medicine. And I don't think he's gonna pull that trigger, to be honest. Call his bluff. Instead, he goes with them as Joseph continues to batten down the hatches before falling through a hole in the floor. So basically these creatures have dug up under the house and will definitely be storming that place that night. So it appears they plan on counterattacking after Joseph stole one of them. This seems to imply the idea that revenge may exist, which is definitely a primate trait. Also, it's a tiger trait. I forgot what it was. This guy wounded a tiger and he couldn't track it any further, and then the tiger tracked him back. Somebody will probably put the entire story, but basically it tracked him all the way back to where he was staying, and I think it took him out. Anyways, the whole point is tigers keep a grudge. Cats have been known to keep grudges for up to 16 hours. So back over at the farm, they then tie up Thomas as the situation starts getting a little weird. Grabbing his legs, they go to fire a shot, which is just incredibly stupid, as then the guy who was gonna do it is dragged under the ground as the creatures begin their attack. For what purpose do they have this vigilante-style party on just this one guy and want to blow off Thomas's legs? I don't know. That's the fun, I suppose. So back at the farmhouse, the dad checks outside as he heard something, before immediately getting jumped by a creature and bitten, as then it jumps on the mom. A bunch of the other creatures now start running up the stairs as it starts like head slamming, open and closed. And its main internal mouth appears to like open and then consume her. Like what in the sweet Lord is happening here? So we've seen what their heads do, and you're probably like, what in the name of all that is holy is that? This may be what had been disturbing Joseph originally, because the mouth itself appears to be there to disorient a person through the concussive sound it produces by slamming closed. The connective tissue may actually help aid in this, but internally, it appears that it is able to project an internal mouth outwards, completely absorbing a person. It may also be that this mouth mechanism is used to completely crush the bones of a human, turning you into a fine paste, depending on what sort of force is used, which given how it actually sounds, I'm going to guess is quite a bit. The internal mouth then sucks up the broken body of a person, which is pretty metal. This does make me question, however, where the brain actually resides. This amount of force being imparted into the brain would absolutely destroy it. Some people may think of like a woodpecker, but they kind of have adaptations that protect the brain actually from like preventing it from hitting the skull, so to speak. But I'm pretty sure with this much force of a jaw slamming, it's not going to be protected. So I do want to point out that when they cut off this part of the body earlier, the creature is stopped. Clearly, it's intelligent as it seeks vengeance and can plan in advance, as made known when they build a tunnel underneath the house. It can collectively form a wheel to move distances very quickly also. Therefore, given the length of its head, I would have to assume that there is a brain inside, probably behind the snout as with most animals, and internally, it must have more cushioning protecting the brain from impact and force created by the mandible running into the skull with that type of ferocity. The brain itself would have to be rather large with a sizable frontal cortex, given how it chooses to plan and attack, and along with that, the ire it seems to have only towards humanity, which was its understood aggressor at the beginning, making it come up from underneath the ground in the first place. And this is seen due to the fact that the livestock that are on pretty much all farms appear to be completely untouched by these creatures. They only go after humans. They are most definitely carnivores and meat eaters given how they choose to hunt man and current depopulation issues with humanity that we're experiencing, along with the sharp teeth that they are sporting. So back at the house party, Charlotte heard the attack but didn't do anything at first. Finding a blood trail, certainly not ideal. Heading into the bathroom, she finds the creature doing something. Her mother appears to have been absorbed and is in the stomach of this creature, which is now just laying there after its large meal. Seeing as these creatures are highly eusocial, they can pull themselves together and then form this rolling wheel. Their heads open and close, producing a loud noise, seemingly disorientating their prey, so Charlotte saves Thomas's tail after this, as her home then burns down and her parents are gone. So back over at the absolute liability house, Joseph begins hearing the door shake. As the peephole opens, this time it's Thomas's hand as Joseph lets him in. Now it's just the three of them, and I guess Nicolas Cage, who's passed out in the back. They then ran there, but this time they didn't slip and knock themselves out for several hours. Joseph asks if anybody else made it. Nope. And then hearing coughing in the corner, Cage wakes up from his coma, finally. I mean, you guys could have at least cleaned the blood off his face, is all I'm saying. So Joseph reports that they dug up through the ground and they're going to come up through the floors. They ask what they should do as Cage tells them, you're going to have to fight. That's really all you can do. Joseph now runs out to his lab as Thomas asks why the lab was destroyed. Joseph says that it was him. Again, never explained why. They begin loading up the fuel as the quadruped starts barking. So lock and loading, brides of Christ, they start collecting up all the gas that they can then dump down the hole. Joseph says that he needs about 10 minutes for something nondescript. Still don't know what that's about. Like, was this part of the plan? I don't know. So now they start getting the house in order so that they can keep these things away as they start pouring gas everywhere and light it all on fire. Or set it up to light on fire. Which is really strange as there's a bunch of open flames around them. So yeah, sure, the gas fumes wouldn't immediately explode at all. So as they nail wood to the door though, the creatures start breaking through the floorboards because throwing a bunch of chairs on it did not work. Smoking a cigar and inhaling like a total nerd, Joseph then sets the trap as dear old Papa Cage is still passed out. As he lays there though, one of the creatures enters the room. Downstairs, a hand begins reaching out to break in as it just easily crawls over the boards. Thomas goes after it with a knife as it attacks and then pulls out the knife as the other tries to disorient them with skull sounds. So anyways, Charlotte starts blasting. Headshots do in fact work on these creatures, indicating the central nervous system is located there, which makes me wonder, how is the military overwhelmed by these things? It doesn't make any sense. Papa Cage though is back up and walking, and he's looking a little worse for wear. He starts firing wildly into the floorboards as the matches start lighting. Checking the room, Papa Cage apparently took out the one that was coming after him as the others begin amassing in the hallway as he begins beating them back with a bat as they start falling through the floorboards. It now becomes a massive fight against these creatures. Seeing as these creatures approach though, Papa Cage locks his sons and Charlotte in a room as the rest of the house catches on fire with him staying in there. It now flashes back to when they were younglings. Where did he get these younglings? Did he find them or were they stolen? We still don't fully know. They say it's Nicolas Cage's sons, but I don't know, man. Find out on the next episode of Dragon Ball Z. So the creatures now break in as the entire house detonates as the fridge they were hiding in is just getting the absolute business. I don't think an explosion lasts that long. Kicking it open though, they have survived, but their old man, probably not. The house is totally shreked, and as they dig through the rubble, one of the creatures bursts out of the wreckage as many others start doing the same. Running to the golf cart, they get it started up and then take off out of there. The creatures now form a burning pillar of themselves like a bunch of idiots, as then the rest of them nope out of there. I mean, I suppose they were trying to form their like burning wheel of death, but whatever. So they form the burning wheel. Charlotte then throws a shotgun at the wheel, which now it falls apart due to them burning to death. Why this didn't work earlier, I have no idea. So looking up, they now spot something above them. Stars. Why are stars significant? Because Mars was in power raid, that's why. Returning to the house the next day, Joseph says he doesn't want to rebuild the house, he wants to build something different. So now we get this outro of everyone super unhappy about their new orphan status. Charlotte is being big dramatic, and Thomas and Charlotte then hug it out while Joseph looks out at his impending loneliness. All's well that ends well. Handing the keys over to Thomas, for some reason, they now need to figure out where they're going. Joseph says there's at least 6 farms in the valley, so hopefully others have survived that onslaught that just happened that night. So now Joseph and Thomas hug it out as they load up the golf cart, and they all just kind of take off and break the tether that held them to the area. Good lord. Also, they left the dog behind. You couldn't have put that guy on the golf cart? Like, no? Okay. So this species is supposed to be a conglomeration, but actually just appears to be other species banded together as individuals who for some reason were hanging out with a subterranean primate. I know. Trust me, it's a Nicolas Cage movie, alright? So upon doing so, behaviors were learned and others would continue to associate with it. This is seen sometimes with things like badgers and coyotes in hunting. In order to survive, they will form friendships, much like also humans and canines. However, this particular species appeared quite detrimental to humanity, but ultimately to say they would overwhelm anything and basically what I just spent an hour and a half watching, what the hell was this? So anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like is greatly appreciated, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Tales channel link, but speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death's Dancer, and Feather. Thank you very much for your support, guys. Next, I'd like to thank our scientists, Argent Sentinel, Dakota23, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, and Trash Panda and Trenchcoat. And to the rest of my patrons, I appreciate y'all's support as well. You're absolute ballers. Alright, so that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.